Alright, what's up, y'all? AJ back here again, getting at y'all with the best of sports and pro wrestling, the best of pro wrestling and sports. Either way you slice it up, you want the best of both worlds, you want to be right here. So if you like what you see here on the channel, definitely be sure to hit that like, share, and subscribe down below. And when you hit that subscribe, don't forget about that notification bell so you know when we're coming through with that good content. And don't hesitate to leave a comment down below, because I do enjoy continuing the conversation beyond the videos. But with that in mind, we're going to go into a new conversation today, and this one's actually one that's been pretty interesting here. Specifically, Angel Reese. Now, a lot of things have been said where Angel Reese is concerned, especially when you think about her, at least as I like to refer to it, her infinitely one-sided beef with Caitlin Clark, as Caitlin Clark does nothing but no-sell the shit out of that situation. So, again, infinitely one-sided beef. But more than anything else, it kind of feels as if so many aspects of that situation seem to be affecting what she's doing on the court. I mean, last night, her and the Chicago Sky went into Barclays Arena, or Barclays Center, and actually caught quite a good ass whooping from the New York Liberty, final score being 85-66. That's a much more respectable looking score than what the game actually was, but that's neither here nor there. And it doesn't help that the Sky are now 2-6 in the current WNBA campaign. But for me, it isn't even just about that or the Caitlin Clark stuff. It just is wild to me because I feel like she's actually a very, very talented athlete. And there may or may not be those of you who disagree with me on that. But whether or not that's the case, the fact of the matter here is that we're talking about this, needless to say, because of her attitude. And this isn't something to where I'm trying to bash on her or anything like that, but there's something to be said for when you're as heavily talked about, whether it's through the media or on actual social media platforms such as this one, Instagram, X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, Facebook, whatever it is, TikTok, it doesn't even matter. The fact that you've seen so many of the issues come up where Angel Reese has been involved it's actually quite alarming, especially when there's been talk of teammates, former and current, who maybe this isn't the exact words, but they don't seem to want to have as much to do with her. And that's sad to see because, again, I feel like she's actually pretty talented, and really you can't let these things be such an issue with as much talent as she does have. Now, is she anything on the level of a Caitlin Clark? Hell no. Absolutely not. And whatever makes her think she is, she really needs to get that out of her head, because that's not something that's ever going to truly be the case the way that she's hoping for. Now, what I will say about it is that hopefully this is something that changes with and from her as time goes on, because I feel like she has an awful lot to offer, not just the women's game, but the game of basketball as a whole. But not as long as things are actually happening the way that they were, and regardless of the things that are being said, it's like this. A wise man once put it like this: where there's smoke, there's fire. And I think there's a fire or two that needs to be put out in this situation, and all of it's entirely on Angel Reese. So hopefully that changes, but again, only time can tell on that one. With that said, we're going to move right along to talking about the NBA Finals. Now, I would have came back to talk about Game 2, but just didn't. Not going to go into any reason for that. Just, I admit, dropped the ball on that one. I'm going to keep that from being a habit, as I have been good about keeping more consistency with uploads and everything. But even with all that being said, of course, it was a hell of a game. Thunder got out to a pretty significant lead, only for the Pacers to find a way to creep back in and end up winning off a Tyrese Halliburton game winner with a final score of 111-110 in Game 1. Now, of course, the Thunder came back very, very strong in Game 2, actually got up as many as 30 points, I believe it was, might have been 32, and ended with a final score of 125-107, but a lot of that has to do with the fact that they have been pretty good against Tyrese Halliburton. But to me, I kind of feel like Halliburton could be better at asserting himself early, and I think both games 1 and 2 are great examples of that, especially given the fact that it's one thing to be able to come through with some late game heroics, but for you being probably the best player on the team, I'm thinking he is, you got to be able to bring it throughout the course of the game. And a lot of people have been saying, in the case of the Thunder, you got to be doing it for all 48 minutes. Same is true for Halliburton. You got to be bringing it for all 48 minutes. Given that the scene has shifted to Indianapolis, hopefully for the Pacers' sake, Halliburton is able to get going a lot earlier and a lot more often. But we'll find that out here in the next 30 minutes or so as we're getting ready for game time. But yeah, I'm definitely liking what we're getting from both teams in this series. I have the Pacers winning tonight, and I still have Pacers in 6. Even in the scenario where it winds up being 3-3, I'll still go Pacers in 7. But again, we'll see how this all works out. And, you know, it's just been really, really cool to watch, and I think it'll continue to be competitive throughout. So let's see what we have to look forward to tonight. That being said, speaking of things that we can look forward to, we got to talk a little bit about Kevin Durant here. And it's, of course, been reported by Shams Charania we got 5 teams that are front runners in terms of acquiring the services of one Kevin Durant. That being the San Antonio Spurs, the Houston Rockets, Minnesota Timberwolves, Miami Heat, and the New York Knicks. I want to talk about the latter one in the New York Knicks real quick, as they've got some really interesting stuff going on. They just fired Tom Thibodeau. They're in the process of looking for the next head coach, so it'll be interesting to see how all of that works out if they are able to find a way to acquire Kevin Durant. But more than anything else, you know, I feel like it's also interesting because there was actually an opportunity for him to join the New York Knicks a few years ago, specifically when him and Kyrie Irving signed with the Brooklyn Nets. Now, to me, it really depends on what's on the roster after such a trade goes down, should it go down. You know, you could argue that this is the kind of thing that was needed for the likes of a Jalen Brunson, who, if we're being honest, was the one carrying the New York Knicks not only throughout the latter course of the regular season, but definitely through these playoffs. Not to take anything away from Karl Anthony Towns, Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby, any of those guys, as all of them are definitely pretty good, but you gotta actually be able to have someone alongside a Jalen Brunson who's going to give you that extra oomph in terms of being a contender for the NBA championship. And to me, Kevin Durant definitely is that guy. You could say the same thing about Giannis Antetokounmpo, but really for me, I think ideally New York to me is the place for him to go. I definitely see Rudy Gobert being a part of that package for the Knicks going to Phoenix. And it'll be interesting to see what the Suns do around that, Devin Booker, and I guess Bradley Beal, as he's got a no-trade clause to where unless he gives the okay, he ain't going nowhere. That's really interesting because I'm not really sure that you could say Bradley Beal offers anything to the Phoenix Suns that leads to them being any more of a championship contender than what they already are. At least certainly no more so than what Kevin Durant would do for the Knicks or even the Heat or even the aforementioned Spurs, Mavericks, or Wolves. Wolves would really be interesting because who wouldn't want to see an Anthony Edwards KD team up? I mean, how much fun would that be? But nevertheless, we'll see how all that all ends up working out, and I mentioned Rudy Gobert, that's where he'd be coming from. I wanted to say Karl Anthony Towns being a part of the trade from the Knicks to get KD into New York, but also neither here nor there. At least you don't have to worry about that and correcting me in the comment section. But definitely know what y'all think down below. Do you see Durant in the Knicks uniform? Does he go to any of the other 4 teams, or do you have somewhere else in mind for him to go? Let me know what y'all think down below. Of course, like, share, subscribe, and hit that notification button if you enjoyed. And with that in mind, this has been your time with A&J, and I appreciate you spending it with me.